He leaned on the doorframe like he owned the oxygen in the room. "Half your $250K client bonus is mine," he said, with the smirk of a man who's never had to finish a spreadsheet in his life. That's how Carl operated, like the world owed him interest for the effort of existing. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him, mentally noting the gelled hair, the cufflinks, confidence of a man who once got a trophy for best synergy in a company retreat. He walked off before I could even blink, already opening his phone like he was checking which luxury golf course to blow my money on. I sat there frozen, my body stuck in the same ergonomic chair I'd practically fused with for the last 6 months. 6 months of onboarding a legacy client so ancient, their ERP system still ran on a Windows XP relic. 6 months of Zoom calls scheduled at 6 a.m. because Mr. Langston's a morning person. 6 months of babysitting stakeholders who needed 5 rounds of internal alignment just to decide on a color palette for their dashboard. I earned that bonus. Every damn penny. And now Carl, the newly minted VP of Business Development with a LinkedIn feed full of generic leadership quotes and humble brags about executive vision, thought he could just claim it. Before I go any further, if you're already hooked, and I hope you are, tap that subscribe button and throw us a like. Seriously, 90% of folks who listen don't subscribe, and every click keeps the lights on around here and the drama flowing. Helps the team stay caffeinated and slightly less dead inside. Okay, back to the corporate heist. The worst part? It wasn't even shock. It was that deep, stomach-hollowing recognition. I'd seen this movie before, different cast. Same ending. You bleed for a project, someone with a fancier title skates in last minute, and suddenly you're just support. Never the closer, never the face on the wind slide. I'd been in the trenches for over a decade, built client relationships from scratch, dealt with tech meltdowns, budget freakouts, even a CIO mid-divorce who insisted on therapeutic update calls at 10 p.m. But this was different. This time I had receipts. Carl didn't know it yet, but every call, every draft, every single decision log, my initials were on them, not his. I was the one who kept the deal breathing through 3 CFO changes and one unfortunate Christmas party where their lead engineer drunkenly confessed to a security breach. I patched it, quietly, efficiently. Now this blow-dried mosquito thought he could suck 50% of my bonus just because he shook a few hands at a golf fundraiser and added himself to one client email chain with a great job team. But I didn't lash out. That's what he'd expect. He wanted conflict, something he could escalate and weaponize with HR. I'd learned a long time ago that in offices like Stonebridge, rage just makes you look unstable. Paper trails, those made you bulletproof. So I went quiet, didn't complain, didn't reply when he forwarded my project tracker to the CEO with his name added to the summary, just kept working, logged every conversation, timestamped every client approval. My mouse click speed could have passed for forensic analysis. Still, the betrayal simmered. It wasn't just the money, though God knows I needed it. I was still paying off my dad's hospice bills, a busted transmission sitting in my garage like a $3,800 paperweight, and a teenage daughter about to tour colleges she had no idea we couldn't afford. That bonus wasn't luxury, it was survival. It was my damn life jacket in a storm I'd been treading water through for years. Carl didn't just take money. He tried to steal my dignity, my narrative, my win. But I wasn't about to be another footnote in his highlight reel. He wanted credit. Great, I'd let him walk straight into it, and when he did, I'd make sure the trap was already set. It started with a whisper. Literally. I was refilling my sad excuse of a coffee, half burnt, half resentment, when Jamie from sales leaned in and muttered he did the same thing to Pete. Q2 last year. Took a third of his commission and said it was for strategic oversight. I blinked. Pete from West Coast Enterprise. Jamie nodded. Didn't even fight it. That HR called it aligned with VP support structure. Whatever that means. Then it kept coming. Slowly, quietly. One offhand comment at the elevator. One Slack message that vanished after a few minutes. Carl had history. Sharon from Ops got steamrolled on a project bonus that she led for 9 months. Malik in contracts said Carl once had a clause added post-signature that rerouted incentive payouts into a team win pool, which of course, only he ever dipped into. Each story dropped like a brick into my gut, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Carl was the office's glossy plague, harmless at first glance, deadly if you stood still too long. He didn't earn anything. He repositioned, like a raccoon in a Gucci belt. I went to HR just to test the waters. Spoke to Rachel, the same HR generalist who once tried to do a mandatory birthday Zoom sing-along for someone who'd just gotten laid off. She clicked through a few tabs and gave me the corporate equivalent of a shrug. If finance processed the request, it must have had executive sign-off. Who? I asked. Probably Carl, right? The man signed off on his own commission hijack, and that was good enough for them. Finance, bless their soul-crushed hearts, told me they were just following Carl's instructions. The whole place ran on plausible deniability and flavored LaCroix, so I did what I do best. I documented. I pulled every calendar invite, every CRM note. I dug up email chains where I walked the client through deployment stages, risk assessments, budget breakdowns. There were threads going back 8 months. Carl's name didn't show up until 3 weeks ago, and even then, only to CC himself on a status update I sent after midnight while my kid was asleep on the couch next to me. I downloaded Zoom call summaries, transcribed chats, even exported timestamps from our project management tool. The digital footprint looked like a murder scene. Every single track led back to me. Carl's only contribution was a smiley face reaction to one of my updates. The man's emoji game was stronger than his ethics, but I didn't stop there. I checked our internal portal for bonus eligibility criteria. Found the PDF buried under 4 folders with names like Q2 Initiative Old Final Realifinal. In it, one sentence stood out like it was written in blood. Final performance-based disbursements must be directly correlated to project ownership and client continuity. Client continuity, that was the key. I'd been their sole point of contact since kickoff. Carl didn't even know the client's daughter's name, and I only knew that because she'd once joined a call during a power outage to show me her stuffed animal collection. I'd sat through every delay, every passive-aggressive procurement dispute, every leadership shuffle where I had to repitch the same integration plan 3 different times. Carl hadn't earned a dime, yet the system was rigged to let him swoop in and siphon off the win like a botched heist scene where the guy with the briefcase just walks out the back door. But here's the thing about being underestimated for a decade. You learn how to weaponize it. I wasn't the type to scream. I was the type to collect. I bookmarked every tab, created a private folder with layers so deep even IT would need a Sherpa to find it. I renamed it something boring, quarterly sync planning just in case. And I started writing. Not a complaint, not a rant, just facts, a timeline, bullet points. Short, clinical, unemotional, because emotion wouldn't save me here, but precision, that would gut him. On Tuesday at 8:14 a.m., Carl sent the email. Subject line, Q3 client win summary plus next steps. It was dressed up like a celebration, exclamation marks, bolded bullet points, even an embedded stock photo of a handshake that probably came from a Google image search for trust. But buried under the confetti and corporate spin was a quiet little turd of a paragraph. Grateful to have worked closely with Evelyn on this, especially as we finalized Phase 2 implementation. Our collaborative approach ensured the client felt fully supported from both a strategic and operational lens. Translation. Look at me. I was here the whole time. I didn't reply, that was the game. Carl wanted a reaction, something he could quote twist forward to HR. I knew better than to bite. Instead, I took a different route when he didn't see coming. I forwarded the original project tracker, my tracker, not the sanitized version Carl kept trying to edit, to the CEO's executive assistant. I didn't even address Carl, just added a brief note per Q3 wrap-up, attaching client development timeline for records. Let me know if legal needs full audit trail. I CC'd legal, not HR. Legal, that part mattered. And then I started the real work. See, what Carl didn't know, what most people don't know, is that the client's compliance team had asked me months ago to review some language in the statement of work regarding continuity. They'd had a bad experience with a vendor years back, got ghosted after signing, and they'd made it crystal clear they'd never tolerate that again. The clause we landed on back then? Primary relationship management may not be reassigned during or immediately following a contractual bonus period without express written consent from the client. Pretty words, but not enforceable yet, so I picked up the thread, quietly. Just a clarification request, I said, nothing urgent. Reached out to the client's legal liaison, Alan, a man who wore sweater vests like armor, and once told me his favorite show was Columbo because the guy never had to raise his voice. I proposed a minor language adjustment for Phase 2 of the deal. All bonus-eligible contract points must be facilitated through the existing primary contact. Any deviation or representation by a non-listed stakeholder voids all performance-based provisions. He responded in under 10 minutes. Makes sense. Send over the updated doc. I felt my pulse settle like a puzzle piece locking in. Because now, if Carl even breathed near the bonus or tried to list himself as co-lead, the clause would nuke the entire payment structure. The client's own contract would kill it, and no one could say I didn't give him rope. Back at the office, Carl was still working his strategic involvement angle. I overheard him in the hallway, casually telling someone from product, yeah, Evelyn handled the admin side, but I closed the confidence gap. Clients respond better when execs step in. I wanted to scream. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with the client for next Thursday, our regular biweekly check-in, the one Carl never bothered to show up to unless there were muffins. I added one more person to the invite, our CEO, Harold, made it seem routine. Thought it'd be good for visibility, I wrote. Client had some high-level feedback. Carl saw the meeting pop up. Within an hour, he replied to the thread with happy to join as well, great touchpoint to align on shared goals. Of course you are, Carl. He was stepping right into it, and I wasn't about to stop him. By the end of the day, he'd sent another status update to finance, attaching a memo titled, Joint Account Leadership Incentive Allocation Breakdown. He CC'd 3 VPs, but not me. Didn't matter. Because I had something stronger than access. I had sequence, he was grooming a story. Fine, I was writing the ending, and it wouldn't have a happy one. The call was booked. The trap was live, now I just needed him to talk. On Wednesday morning, the air in the office was thick with whatever Carl wore, some overpriced cologne that smelled like minty ego and unpaid child support. He strutted past my desk without so much as a glance, then disappeared into finance like he was Moses parting the Red Sea of spreadsheets. By noon, it hit. An amended payout request email dropped into the compensation queue. I wasn't copied directly, of course, Carl wouldn't risk that. But I had a friend in payroll, Marcy. We did a chili cook-off together last winter. Her jalapeno cornbread changed my life. She forwarded it with no subject line, just a single sentence. You seeing this bullshit? I opened the PDF. There it was. In Times New Roman Arrogance. Project. Langston Manufacturing Integration, Q3 Primary. Evelyn Harper co-lead. Carl Montgomery split. 50/50 performance-based payout as agreed verbally during Q3 wrap. Verbally. That one word could take down empires. It was Carl's go-to move, say it in a hallway, refer to it in a recap email, and boom, it's lore. And just like that, half my lifeline was about to be siphoned into the man's bonus pool like he'd helped me carry this beast over the finish line. I didn't reply. Not to Carl. Not to finance. Not even to Marcy. Instead, I clicked over to my calendar and opened Thursday's standing call with Langston Manufacturing, the one we'd had every other week for 6 months straight. 11 a.m. sharp. Same Zoom link. Same invitees. Only this time, I made one small addition. Plus Harold Bates, CEO, Stonebridge, and as expected, Carl replied within the hour. Looping myself in as well, great time to highlight cross-functional support for Phase 2. Of course you are. Then I did something that would have seemed reckless to anyone who didn't know the full playbook. I picked up the phone and called the client. No email, no record, just voice. Alan answered on the third ring. Evelyn, hey, all good for tomorrow. Yep. I said, just wanted to give you a heads up. There's been a little internal confusion on our side about project credit. Credit? He sounded wary. For what? Nothing serious, I said, but some folks are looking to attribute joint effort at the finish line. He went quiet for a second. Then, you mean someone's trying to grab your bonus? I laughed, soft and dry. Let's just say it's a little noisier than usual in the background. I'll explain more on the call. Alan didn't miss a beat. We can clarify that on the call. There it was. That was all I needed. He hung up. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the office around me like background static. I watched Carl stroll out of finance, shaking hands with someone like he'd just closed world peace. Let him, because every step he took now was downhill. Fast. The more he claimed, the deeper the hole. And the Thursday meeting? That wasn't a meeting anymore. That was a spotlight. The CEO would be there. The client would be there. Carl would be there. And no amount of bravado or jargon was going to undo what I had in writing. Let him keep digging. All I had to do was hold the shovel. Thursday, 10:57 a.m. I'm staring at the Zoom link like it's a live wire. I'd barely slept. Not because I was nervous, because I was coiled, taut. Every move Carl had made, every smug shoulder pat, every team win email he sent to execs like confetti before a parade he didn't earn, it had all led to this. At 11 a.m. sharp, the familiar chime rang out. Alan Langston has joined the meeting. 1 second later, Harold Bates has joined the meeting. Then Carl, camera on, teeth gleaming like someone had waxed his face. I clicked join. Morning all, I said, calm as cold water. Harold gave a brief nod, already distracted by his second monitor. Alan smiled. Hi, Evelyn, always good to see you. Carl leaned forward like a dog about to beg for table scraps. Alan, great to connect again. Looking forward to aligning on Phase 2. I didn't respond to him. Instead, I shared my screen, a simple, clean Word doc titled Langston Manufacturing Q3 Performance Closeout. 3 pages, all bullets, all facts. I scrolled to the bottom. Before we move forward, I said, voice neutral. I just wanted to confirm the payout recipient listed on the performance bonus agreement. Per the language in the updated clause, I believe the client is required to verify continuity. Alan's expression didn't change. He just leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and said, can you confirm who that is? There it was. My trap had a voice now. And Carl, God bless his greedy little heart, couldn't resist. That would be Carl Montgomery and Evelyn Harper, he said, bright and chipper, co-leads for Q3 success delivery. I didn't flinch, I didn't blink, I just went still. Alan nodded slowly, looked away for a moment like he was reading something on a second screen, then came back with a face made of stone. I see. Well, he paused, folded his hands. As per Section 3C of our contract, which you'll find mirrored in the clause we finalized last week, any bonus redistribution or deviation from the original point of contact, without prior approval, voids the terms of the performance-based incentive. Carl blinked once, twice. I'm sorry, he said, a little too high-pitched. Harold looked up from his screen. Alan continued, unbothered. This isn't ambiguous. Evelyn has been our sole interface since the beginning. Her fingerprints are on every deliverable. Any suggestion of dual leadership at this stage, especially retroactively, compromises the trust we've built. If Carl is listed as a co-recipient, that officially voids the deal. Is that your intent? The silence could have sucked the oxygen out of the room. Carl stammered. Wait, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Harold turned his camera on fully now. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. I returned the look with the poise of someone who knew the exact weight of every document in her arsenal. I've included all original communications, meeting logs, and approval chains in the shared folder, Harold, I said. Nothing was altered. No co-lead was listed prior to this week. Harold clicked something, probably the folder. His jaw tightened. Carl looked like a kid caught cheating with the answer sheet taped to his thigh. Alan leaned back again. Let us know how you'd like to proceed. From our end, if Evelyn remains the sole contact, we're happy to move forward. If not, he shrugged. We'll consider the contract void. Then he muted himself, not hung up, just muted, leaving the silence to rot. Carl finally croaked. I didn't mean. Harold cut him off. Let's take this offline. Then he left the meeting. Alan followed. Carl sat there, blinking. I stayed until he left too. Then I closed my laptop, walked to the break room, and made myself the slowest cup of tea anyone's ever brewed in an office microwave. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't the win. This was the pin pulled on the grenade. Now I just had to wait for the boom. It hit like a car crash in slow motion. The words had barely left Carl's mouth, his name said with that practiced, preening cadence of someone used to panel discussions and LinkedIn endorsements when Alan struck. His voice was flat, not angry, not loud, just, final, this officially voids the deal. Is that your intent? Time stopped. I felt it. The absence of movement, of breath. You could hear the tension click into place like a loaded safety being switched off. Carl's mouth was still open, halfway through whatever follow-up he thought he was going to say, but nothing came out. Across the screen, Harold, the CEO, leaned back in his chair like gravity had just increased. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. His eyes flicked to the corner of his monitor, probably reading the same contract clause I had memorized 2 weeks ago. He exhaled once through his nose. That was it, Carl? Paled, not metaphorically. The color literally drained from his face like someone turned down the saturation. His neck flushed red, but his cheeks went corpse white. His shoulders dropped by maybe an inch, just enough for me to clock the exact moment he realized he'd stepped off a cliff without looking. Alan didn't gloat, just kept reading. Section 3C, he said calmly, as if he was discussing the weather. Continuity of relationship. In the event that the designated primary contact is altered, shared, or reassigned in any capacity during the bonus evaluation period, and said change is not disclosed and approved in writing by both parties, all incentive-based conditions shall be considered null and void. Then he closed his folder. Slowly, deliberately. You have no documentation of a co-lead arrangement, he continued. And frankly, I'm insulted it was even implied. Evelyn has been our only contact. She's the reason this integration didn't implode 3 months ago. Still, no one said a word. Carl cleared his throat like he was about to object, but nothing followed. Harold finally leaned forward, elbows on desk, fingers steepled. Carl, he said, his voice low and sharp like a freshly honed blade. Is there any written record, internal or client-facing, that indicates you were co-lead on this deal prior to your compensation request? Carl croaked. I added value, strategic visibility, that's not what I asked. Dead silence. I stared at Carl, letting the weight of his unraveling land exactly where it needed to. I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. He opened his mouth again, closed it, and then Alan stood up, or rather, watched as the camera shifted and the top of his sweater vest disappeared from frame. The universal sign for I'm done with this call. He spoke one last time, off camera now. Let me know when you've sorted yourselves out. As it stands, Langston Manufacturing considers this deal void until proper alignment is reestablished, preferably with someone competent. Then click, he was gone. The line went dead. Harold didn't move for a beat. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Carl. Get off the call. Carl hesitated like he couldn't believe this was actually happening. Like maybe if he stalled long enough, someone would undo it. But Harold didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Now, Carl left the meeting. The screen went black where his smug little video window used to sit. And just like that, it was just me and Harold, 2 tiles, 1 disaster. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands and muttered, not to me but to himself, Jesus Christ. I waited, then he looked up. I need a full timeline, start to finish. Names, dates, files, it's already prepared, I said. Check your legal folder. It's titled Continuity Records Langston. He nodded. No compliment, no apology, just necessity. I didn't need his praise. The hole was dug. The body was Carl's. Harold ended the Zoom call with a curt, we'll handle it internally. Then he clicked out without waiting for a response, as if the air itself had become radioactive. The silence afterward wasn't just absence, it was extraction. Like the room itself had to suck all the Carl out of it before anyone could breathe again. I closed my laptop. No smile, no victory dance, just a slow breath in held for 5 seconds and let out through my nose. My tea was still sitting on the windowsill. Cold now. I sipped it anyway. Tasted like stale chamomile and vindication. My phone buzzed within minutes. From Donna C., legal subject. Urgent Langston incident documentation message. Please send any materials related to your direct work with the Langston account. Timeline, communications, meeting logs, etc. ASAP. I didn't even open a new tab. I just dragged the folder, my pristine, timestamped digital vault, and hit send. Attachment, Langston Project Timeline Final V3 Actual Final Thisone DocX within the hour. I was CC'd on an email from Internal Audit, marked Priority 1. It was titled, Subject, Investigation Initiated Carl Montgomery / Performance Discrepancies Body. Per CEO Directive, this review is confidential and urgent. All stakeholders are advised not to engage Carl Montgomery until further notice. Another email dropped moments later, this time from HR. Subject, Personnel Status Update Carl Montgomery Body. Effective immediately, Carl Montgomery has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. All inquiries should be directed to legal. The entire office went still. People didn't talk. They pinged in Slack DMs, cautiously, like the walls might echo. I walked to the kitchen for another tea bag, something with a name like Tranquil Breath because irony helps, and passed 3 managers in hushed conversation. They fell silent the second they saw me, not in a hostile way, more like, reverent wary, like someone who'd just watched a mouse take down a hawk. Carl's absence created a sudden vacuum. Meetings he'd usually hijack with buzzwords were now calm, focused. Nobody tried to fill the void with fake cheer or scramble to protect him. In fact, the more his name came up in buried Slack threads, the more receipts came flooding in. Turns out I wasn't the first, but I might be the last. People started dropping breadcrumbs. A file Carl had edited post-signature. A Slack message where he called someone else's client my account. An offhand brag during happy hour about steering revenue without touching a spreadsheet. Man had been padding his portfolio with other people's labor like a raccoon building a throne from stolen silverware. Legal asked if I could hop on a follow-up call. I didn't need to prep. I opened my laptop, turned my camera on, and greeted them like I was logging into just another sync. Calm, neutral, they asked questions. I gave answers, dates, file paths, timestamps. They seemed surprised. You prepared this in advance, the junior counsel asked. I nodded. Started compiling once Carl forwarded my tracker to the CEO with his name at the top. That was 9 days ago. The GC just said smart, that was it. Not nice job, not thank you for protecting the company, just smart. But that word carried weight when it came from legal. After the call, I walked back to my desk, passed by Carl's now dark corner office, his standing desk frozen mid-rise, his weird inspirational poster that said crush your lanes still taped to the wall. I kept walking. No one stopped me. No one dared to ask what happened. Everyone's suddenly very quiet when the office predator gets tranquilized mid-prowl, and no one ever wants to admit they saw him sharpening his claws and said nothing. But they saw now, they saw me. By Friday morning, the board smelled blood, not in the quarterly growth opportunity kind of way. No, this was internal threat detection mode, when executives suddenly remember they're liable for more than yacht club dues and holiday party menus. Carl's name was now spoken the way people talk about food poisoning, quietly, quickly, and with a slight wince. Word got around that Harold had to present a special briefing to the board late Thursday night. I wasn't invited, obviously, but someone in IT leaked the agenda slide titles. Contract breach timeline Langston revenue forecasts. Null scenario vs. Reinstatement risk of repeat offender pattern. Internal safeguards translation. How did we let a $4.7 million client walk because Carl couldn't keep his hands out of the bonus jar? By 10:00 a.m., my calendar pinged. Subject, consultation Langston recovery strategy attendees, CEO, General Counsel, SVP Client Relations, and me. No hello, no preamble. I walked into the glass conference room, and Harold just gestured toward the chair like we were picking up a conversation we'd started a year ago. Evelyn, he said, walk us through how we fix this. I'd never been asked to explain anything to a board-level room before. Never been the person whose bullet points determined whether or not we got a second chance. But that day, I had the floor. I kept it clinical, professional, unemotional, just like the file. I walked them through the original deal structure, the trust we'd built over 6 months, the post-signature clause Carl had tried to bypass, and the client's final statement, Evelyn stays or the deal doesn't. Silence. Then Harold asked the golden question. Will Langston come back? They're open, I said. If the contract is updated to reflect sole contact continuity through Phase 2, and if performance bonuses are assigned cleanly moving forward. He nodded, didn't even look surprised. The SVP scribbled a note. The GC looked relieved. Do it, Harold said. 10 minutes later, I got the follow-up from legal. Subject, Langston contract updated engagement terms body. Attached, please find the updated agreement. Please review and confirm as sole representative. Attachment, Langston SOW Rev 2 E Harper only docx that underscore in the file name. That was my name where Carl's used to be. And then came the cherry on top. HR emailed me, CCing legal, audit, and compliance. Subject, Carl Montgomery HR Action Summary Body. After internal review, Mr. Montgomery's amended payout request has been reclassified as bad faith misrepresentation. This violation constitutes grounds for immediate contract termination under Clause 14.3b. I read it twice, slowly, not because I couldn't believe it, but because, finally, someone had called the thing what it was. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, a lie. The company's golden retriever in a tailored blazer had finally pissed on the wrong rug, and this time someone checked the security footage. The shift was subtle but seismic. Suddenly, execs who'd never remembered my name were looping me into conversations. "Let's run it by Evelyn" became a sentence I heard more than once that week. People knocked before entering my office. Harold even stopped by late afternoon, leaned in like we were old war buddies, and said, "Good work. Quiet saves don't go unnoticed forever." He meant it as a compliment. I took it as an admission. When the Langston deal was re-signed Monday morning, the client sent me a handwritten note. "No offense, but Carl made us nervous. You made us believe in the deal again. See you in Chicago." I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, didn't frame it, didn't brag, because this wasn't vindication with fireworks and a marching band. This was the slow, satisfying silence of receipts finally being read aloud. And for the first time in years, the office was paying attention. The nail wasn't the investigation, wasn't the HR violation, or the admin leave, or even the deal being reinstated with my name etched into the contract like a watermark. The nail was a 6-second audio clip, pulled straight from the Zoom recording. My personal backup, because I don't trust corporate cloud storage any more than I trust Carl not to microwave fish in the break room. The clip, Alan's voice, steady and dry, saying, "This officially voids the deal. Is that your intent?" I'd timestamped it, clipped it, filed it. Legal had asked for documentation. I gave them a kill shot. Coupled with the PDF Carl sent to finance, his precious amended payout request, dated and timestamped to high hell, it was over. I didn't even need to show up to the last board review. I just forwarded the files. Subject, deal disruption evidence summary attachments. Langston audio MP3 and payout request C. Montgomery PDF. By the time Harold called me into his office the next day, the work was already done. Carl's name had disappeared from the internal org chart, just gone, like a bad variable in a line of code deleted before it could crash the system. His office was empty, desk cleared. The obnoxious hustle harder sign was gone. I don't know if he packed it himself or someone from facilities boxed it up with rubber gloves, but either way it was erased. Sanitized, like he'd never existed. Harold gestured for me to sit. Effective immediately, he said, "You're being transitioned into a hybrid leadership role. Senior account strategist, with an equity component tied to performance tiers." I blinked. Equity? You earned it. You didn't just save a deal. Exposed a structural flaw in how we reward contributions. The board noticed. He slid over a thin folder, just a summary. But on the front, in clean serif font, was my name. No misspellings, no Eva or Evelyn or executive assistant to Carl Montgomery. Just me. I nodded, took it, didn't smile, didn't gush. Just absorbed it like a sponge that had been waiting 10 years to be useful. An hour later, I was in the back of a rideshare headed to the airport. Chicago trip, client meet and greet. In person this time, Alan had insisted, said I deserved a real dinner for once. I opened my laptop in the terminal, cleared out the backlog, scheduled a few auto-replies, and then out of muscle memory more than curiosity, I typed Carl's name into the directory, just to see if it bounced. It didn't. His email still worked, so I sent him nothing. But I did click on his calendar link just once. His out-of-office message popped up in a neat little box, currently on extended leave. For urgent matters, contact HR. That was it. No return date, no forwarding contact, no inspirational quote in his signature, just absence. I closed the window. Put my phone on airplane mode. As the jet pulled back from the gate, I watched the city fall away beneath me. All those tiny office towers and tinted glass panes where people like Carl thrived unchecked for years. Not anymore. My name was on the contract. His was in the archive. And somewhere over Indiana, I finally let myself smile. Just once. Not because I'd won, but because I didn't have to explain to anyone how I did. I had let him talk. And then, when it mattered, I made the call. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.